Hi, my name is James Dowd, and this is reflection number 4 for Fostering Innovation and Leadership, Summer C, 2018 at the University of Florida. For this week's reflection, we are going to be covering Adam Grant's Chapter 5 in Originals. And to start off the chapter, Grant talks about horizontal hostility. And before reading about this, I had no idea what this term meant. But, after learning about it, it is essentially when similar groups work against each other in a way, or go against each other. So some of the examples they gave were vegetarians and vegans, where all vegans are vegetarians, but not all vegetarians are vegans. And they're very closely related in ways. I don't know specifics, but they're very closely related, but they differentiate on certain issues. And there was a survey conducted that showed that vegans were 3 times as hostile towards, or prejudiced towards other vegans and the way they eat. Like, some people choose one food over the other, and what is right, what's wrong. Just small little details that just drive them apart. One of the other examples they gave in the book was Miss America, and how a deaf woman actually won the Miss America competition, but deaf activists actually preached out against this instead of encouraging it. And this was because the Miss American contestant spoke orally in one of her performances or stages, and this drove this activist group to say that she wasn't deaf enough to support them, which is completely absurd, as that's a huge feat for their society and everything else, but this activist group spoke out against it. Secondly, Grant talked about how transparency is sometimes, or not always the best, it's not always the best way to get things done. And this is an idea that I agree with, but has to be taken with a huge grain of salt. So what he talked about was, he gave the example of the women's suffrage movement led by Frances Willard, and how she led women's suffrage under the idea of a better America and an alcohol ban with prohibition, and snuck her agenda within the prohibition guidelines, and that's how the women's suffrage movement was actually passed, which is very interesting because I had never heard that spin on it before. And in this situation, a great thing was accomplished with little transparency shown to the public eye on what the real issue at hand was, but it turned out for the best. I say this should be taken with a huge grain of salt because it could be used for evil doing too, hiding, something bad within the long licensing terms and agreement on an iPhone or something that would allow Apple to sell all your information. It doesn't exist, but it could. And that's an example where transparency would be bad. So I could see it going either way, but in some situations it could be good. One of the other notions talked about in this chapter was the idea that it is better to turn enemies into allies than frenemies. And this is a notion that I completely agree with. For the most part, it's better to have allies than enemies, but enemies will always exist. And I feel like it's hard to play that middle card. If you know someone's against you, you know who you're fighting against. If you know someone's working with you, then you know who to work with. But if you have someone playing both sides, that only complicates matters and doesn't relay a certain line of trust involved there, which can lead to more problems than less. So that's why I would agree that turning them into allies is better than anything. And in the words of JFK, keep your friends close, keep your enemies closer. I liked how the book also referenced this, but used the Godfather reference, not JFK. That's besides the point. Finally, some interesting things I found in this chapter were the use of radicals and radical groups, and usually these have a negative connotation with them, but this chapter kind of shows the positives used in positive radicals. They talked about Susan B. Anthony, Meredith Perry, and Frances Willard. And in the case of Frances Willard, she used the women's suffrage movement and led this whole radical movement, which led to great things for this country. And in the case of Meredith Perry, she was kind of rejected by her professor and all these other people, saying that she couldn't use this technology she was developing, and she eventually gained some serious investors like Mark Cuban, sold her technology to Google, and I believe it was using vibrations to create energy, which is absolutely insane. But she's seen as a radical and did great things with that, and radicals can be good. They can be good in the right context. Finally, one of the big things touched upon this chapter is the key to familiarity. It talked about the new Disney original movie, The Lion King, and how at first it was rejected. It was just seen as Bambi in Africa with lions, but they went back to the drawing boards, reworked it, threw in a mixture of King Lear, a popular play, and with the new additions, they were able to sell it to people, and it was a big success. And that hits home with the familiarity of things people already knew, finding the traces of that in something new, and I mean, that's the real key to innovation, and it can really be shown through The Lion King. I thought that was an interesting fact. Well, that sums up my reflection number 4. Thank you for listening. Have a great day.